God has told me that heavy destruction, great destruction will come up upon the Pepahashataya, Kulia Simahayanda, Holy Antia, Pico Colia Nasai. Ye my sandala de I see Koshantala Lolosi. Ye my sandala de I see Koshantaya. Thank you, Jesus. That was a confirmation.
Turning from us, waters to tribulation with morning, for nothing in the world. Don't tell me what I saw at the crossroads of life and death. Destroying all, distorted by destroying yourself with a living turn on its own.
Welcome to the Dreams of Consciousness podcast. If you'd be so kind, would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. My name is Jarro, and I'm the drummer for Nocturnal Graves.
And Jarro, how would you describe the music of Nocturnal Graves?
I would say it's like black death metal. It's pretty old, traditional kind of sounding stuff.
With a big thrash influence as well, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's the kind of stuff we all actually sort of started listening to when we first got into sort of heavier music.
Would you mind giving a brief history of the band for people who aren't familiar with it?
Sure. So the band started in, I think, the end of sort of 2003, and we did a couple of demos in 2004. A single for a German label, Death Strike Records, came out in sort of mid-2000s, 2006, I think. And then we signed to Nuclear War Now Records for our first album, Satan's Cross. And yeah, we've just been sort of carrying on since then.
And I should mention that you guys are based in Australia, I believe in Melbourne. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah. I actually live 2 hours north from Melbourne, but all the other guys in the band are all from Melbourne.
And when you formed and recorded that first album, it was just you and a bass player, right?
Yeah, well, actually, when we first started, it was me and the bass player from Destructor. We both got the band going, and he left after Satan's Cross was done. But the actual recording lineup for the Satan's Cross album was myself and Regan, who was the bass player, and another guy, James, who at the time was also playing in Denouncement Pyre, also from Melbourne. Yeah. So, yeah, those two bands have kind of shared members throughout the years.
And on that first album, what instruments did you play?
On the first one, I just did the drums and the vocals. And that's actually been quite a contentious issue with all our past, like the subsequent releases. I've played drums, guitars, bass, vocals on each of them in sort of different order. Yeah. So I've actually played everything in this band at one point or another. Yeah.
And currently, are you playing drums and doing vocals, or just playing drums?
I'm for live. We've got a bassist, vocalist, Rob, who also plays in Denouncement Pyre currently. And live, I just do the drums. But on the last two albums, I did drums, guitars, and vocals. And on the second album, I just did guitar, bass, and vocals. We had a drummer on the second album, a different drummer.
Now, do you handle the bulk of the songwriting as well?
The majority of it, yeah. However, the other guys in the band, they contribute a lot to the arrangements. But on the last two records, both the guitarists, Shrapnel and Decay Lust, they've contributed material, but the bulk of it, yeah, has been done by myself, yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about your process when you're approaching songs and when you're coming up with material?
Yeah, sure. Well, basically, we start with, like demo versions of songs that, often we work separately, and we'll come up with our ideas, material. And then when we've got, a few songs and ideas happening each, we start to get together and dismantle that stuff and start to arrange it and build it up into what eventually makes itself onto the record.
So going to the band with a song or maybe some riffs that you've come up with.
Yeah.
At what point do the other members get involved? Do you already have a skeleton of a song, or do you go in with a couple of riffs and ideas of how they can be arranged and everybody works on it together? Well,
basically what we kind of have a formula where each of us will come up with the bulk of an idea, sort of to the point that we get it and go, okay, the other guy, I need input from the others here before we sort of go any further with this. So the songs basically are the majority of it will be completed, but at the same time, we always keep the idea that nothing is off the chopping board until it's done. Like there's plenty of times where someone comes up with a song and in the end, the entire song can be scrapped, or based off that original demo, a song will turn out and it's completely different to what it was. But we put it through that process, like we try a lot of different options and until we're all pretty much happy with it. And it's like, yeah, this song's done. So that's basically the process.
And you like that collaborative process, right? You like the feedback from the other members?
Yeah, definitely.
And the contributions?
Definitely. I spend a lot of time writing music and working on music, but I always find that getting input from the other guys basically gives you options that you otherwise perhaps wouldn't have thought of, and that becomes the real creative thing, when we take a song that's in a demo form, then capitalize on the ideas, and bring it into some kind of structure that really seems to work. I like that process. It's good to get the other guys involved as well, because then you're working as a team, and that's how I think a band should fundamentally operate. That's not to say though that if someone writes a song and the other guys turn around and say, yeah, there's really nothing I could contribute to this beyond perhaps some arrangement ideas, then the song then is done as well. We did that on the last record, the new one, the opening track. Actually, I wrote that over the process of about 2 weeks. And when I sent the demo through to the other guys, the feedback was, I don't really have anything to add to this. Let's just finalize the arrangement when we put some lyrics down. And that song actually stayed pretty much exactly the same. There was just some extra guitar parts added and so on and so forth, a couple of small arrangement things, but otherwise the song itself was done. So, essentially there's no rule, but I've definitely found, and we would all agree, that when the other guys get involved and it's a whole band process to complete the song, it always works out better in the end when you've got input from others.
Now, is the approach to coming up with lyrics and themes for the album similar? Do you guys collaborate on that as well?
Yeah, we do actually. I will usually write the majority of the lyrics as well, and then I often give the lyrics to Decay Lust and say, read over these, and if there's some, particular words or whatever that you think like we could change it to this word or that word, or we could change this line, give me your suggestions, and we kind of work like that. But the bulk of the lyrics and the direction that the song's going to take has always actually been established by that point. So then it's just a matter of fine tweaking things, which I find is something that we're doing also in the studio. Like things change in the studio where we're not stuck in this situation where it's like, well, we did the demo like this, so the album should be identical to this. We kind of keep an open mind and let things just flow and, become what they become, without, all that, those rules and restrictions. We try not to work like that, too regimented. Try and keep things pretty open.
So let's talk about this latest album. I believe this is your fourth album. Is that correct?
It is, yeah.
And it's called An Outlaw Stand, and it came out on January 7th through Season of Mist.
Indeed, yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about when you started working on this album and how the songs came together?
Yeah, we started working on ideas and stuff sort of mid 2019. I started demoing some ideas, and then we put that on hold because we went on tour in Europe for 3 weeks with Destroyer 666, Dead Congregation, and Inconsensus from the UK, and we put the writing process on hold so we could sort of get organised for that. But when we got back from the tour, the idea was, let's ride that kind of momentum that we'd generated within the band throughout that tour. And so we're pretty deep into the writing process, by early 2020. And then we were sort of looking at times to record, like we'd planned, okay, we'll probably start recording around April, May. But then the pandemic hit. So that kind of changed all our plans. Originally, we'd planned to record the album as a full band over the course of a couple of weeks. But in the end, because of restrictions and lockdowns and all that shit that was going on here, it ended up being that I recorded all of the rhythm tracks at home on my own, and then the other guys recorded their lead guitar parts. And then once restrictions and lockdown had sort of come to a bit of a pause, we got together and we recorded all the vocals, and then we had a couple of sessions mixing, so on and so forth. So it was very kind of disjointed, and it wasn't how we intended to record the album. But, at the end of the day, we had to work with what we had, like we had to deal with the circumstance and carry on. It wasn't easy, but at the same time, a little bit of opposition sort of creates a bit of determination, I would say. So we pushed through, and I think the results of the album sort of speak for itself in terms of, where we were at as people and as songwriters, because I think this album is the most sort of vicious thing we've released. And I think the whole scenario surrounding that actually contributed to that, because we actually wrote a lot of material in the middle of the pandemic. There was stuff that was being written for the album that in the end was scrapped in pursuit of stuff that sounded like it was fitting more to the direction that we were going in with this album. So I definitely think the whole pandemic thing played a role in how the album sounds, So that's not actually a bad thing either, because I think it turned out pretty fucking wild, and that was the objective with it,
You mentioned that An Outlaw Stand is the most vicious Nocturnal Graves album that you guys have released. Can you talk about that a little bit more? Like how would you compare this album to, let's say, your earliest releases?
Sure. I think, like, in terms of the sound, after the previous album Titan, we spoke about that record and reflected back on it. And the one thing that the band as a whole, as a collective, the one opinion was it's too clean sounding. For us, that's my biggest gripe with that record. I think the production is a little bit too clean for what we would normally go for. And so this one, that was one thing that we were very conscious of changing. We went for a much rawer sort of guitar sound and the drum sound as well. We wanted something that sounded a lot more sort of untamed and rough, So in terms of the productions on the previous records, I think through years of recording and messing around with sounds and so on and so forth, I think we've got a much better idea of how to get the sound that we want. The first album was done in 2007, and none of us had a lot of experience with the technical side of recording. like gear choices and pulling the sounds that we wanted at the end of the process. It was very sort of, you go in and you start recording and you mix and so on and so forth, but you're just mixing and taking what you recorded, as opposed to really planning out what sort of sounds you're gonna commit to take. Whereas on the last one, we were really conscious of that and shaped the sound throughout the process so that it becomes what we envisioned in our heads, rather than kind of just putting the album down, doing the recording and shaping it to sound, that sounds good. There was a lot more planning went into this one. And I think that just comes down to experience.
So I should mention that the album was recorded at your own studio, IHQ.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
Have you performed all the recording duties for Nocturnal Graves since the beginning?
All of the releases except for the first album and the first single that we did. The demos were just done on like a four-track recorder that I had at the time. But 2011, I started this home studio setup that I've got. And since then, everything we've recorded has been here at my place in my home studio,
So I ask this question a lot of people who are both a member of a band as well as the engineer/producer.
Yep.
But are there additional challenges to performing both roles?
Yeah, I would say that the biggest challenge is that, in the past when I've recorded for whatever other band I've been playing in at whatever time, once the drum parts, for example, are done, then, it's easy to walk away for a bit, come back, go record your drum parts, leave for a few days, come back to the studio, check out what's going on, hang around, blah, blah, blah. You come and go as you please. But when you're in the process of, when you're also having to do the engineering and stuff, you're there for the entire process. You're there for the writing, the rehearsing, the recording, every single element. You've got to be present and engaged in it. And I guess the hardest thing can be that you're sometimes dealing with feeling burnt out. That's actually why this album took a lot longer to record than we had originally planned, because of, I had to spend time practicing the drum parts, for example. Like that took a couple of months to get the drums up to speed to record. And then once that was done, I hadn't picked up a guitar in months. So then I had to go back through that process and get my guitar playing back up to scratch and so on and so forth. So that takes time, and there were a few times along the way where I needed to take a week or two off the process and kind of recharge, because I was also in the middle of a lockdown that went for months. So living remote and, a few hours away from the other guys wasn't possible to, just even spend a weekend just, catching up with the other guys and talking about where we're at with things. I was here in isolation, working on it for months, which sometimes led to a little bit of burnout, I would say. But, at the end of the day, this is what I do for my regular income as well. So I really can't complain about the situation. It's just a matter of balancing things, really.
Fire!
So we spoke a little bit about how the lockdowns and the social distancing rules affected the recording.
Yeah.
When the other members contributed their leads and their parts and the vocals, were they able to do it in the studio, or did they do it remotely?
They did it remotely as well. Both Shrapnel and Decay Lust, they've got, a modest little home recording setup themselves. So they were able to actually track their leads and stuff at home and then send me the files, and I could mix them here. So, the technological side of things, we were kind of lucky to have that set up. Otherwise, the process, we would probably have still been in the process of recording the album right now if we hadn't had those options, and had to have waited to get together to rehearse and record, because Australia is still in and out of restrictions today, 2 years later. So our situation is actually a pretty good one.
And you handled the mixing and mastering yourself, right?
Correct.
Can you talk to me a little bit about your approach to mixing and mastering Nocturnal Graves music?
Sure. Well, like I said just before, we went into this album knowing what we wanted to achieve with the sound. So it really was just a process of steering the mixing and stuff in the direction of where we wanted it to go. There were really no surprises at the end of the process. I really didn't think it was going to sound like this or whatever. Like the whole thing turned out how we had envisioned it. But in terms of like the technical side of things, I suppose it's probably very similar to how most other bands would record. Like you get the drums down, and then you do the guitars, and then you lay down the bass, and then you lay down the vocals, and then once all the tracking's done, you start mixing. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's anything sort of specific that you have in mind with like what gear or something. I don't know.
I mean, if you don't mind talking about that stuff, I think people would be interested in hearing. I think what I like most about the production on this album is that, you mentioned you want it to be a little bit more raw, a little bit more chaotic, and that element is definitely there.
Yep.
But there's a clarity to it, and there's a power to the production where, even as you're getting this chaotic feeling, this, very primal, early black metal, early death metal kind of feeling,
yeah.
You can still hear the instruments quite clearly.
Right.
Especially the drum performance, which I think is a tricky balance. It's tricky to pull that off.
Right. Actually, one thing that we did do a lot of on, in the pre-production of this record and also during the mixing was we listened to a lot of different stuff. Like we're listening to, anything from like, early Sepultura, like Beneath the Remains sort of era Sepultura, Slayer, Rain in Blood, Hell Awaits, that kind of thing. Stuff that's got a really organic sound. And one thing that I was sort of pushing onto the other guys was to listen to those records, and instead of just listening to it as a passenger, really think about the mix, where are things sitting in relation to each other in the mix. And one of the things I pointed out was listen to how loud the drums are on all these records as opposed to how loud the guitars are. And I think like a modern production, I would say it's an error in production techniques, is a lot of extreme metal bands these days, they mix the guitars really, really loud, which when you've got the entire mix sitting there and all of a sudden it's to me, it's like it lacks power, it lacks dynamics. And the correlation I found there was all of those records that I'm thinking there's not a lot of dynamics here, there's not a lot of power, is the guitars are the thing that are driving the album the whole time. They're really loud. And over the course of like 15 to 20 minutes of listening, your ears start to like desensitize. So all of a sudden you get this production that just sounds like it's like flatlining, it's like everything is maxed out and everything is fighting to be heard. And also probably a lot of, heavy compression is an issue that a lot of bands fall into these days in order to try and make their recording sound as loud as possible. Whereas for me, like, the best sounding records are the ones that have a lot more dynamic range. There's softer parts and there are louder parts. So that was something as well on this record that we really went for, because we wanted something that sounded powerful but also dynamic, And I think that approach has really helped the album, because a lot of people have a lot of the commentary has been, it sounds really live and sort of old school, which is what we wanted, but it's also a reflection of modern production sort of techniques where everything is as loud as possible. It sucks the life out of the music, in my opinion. So that was really sort of the approach. Try and keep it more dynamic, and if it means the person listening to it has to turn their stereo up a little bit, so be it. If you have to turn it up, that's okay, because at least you're getting like a more dynamic production, which has a lot more life in it.
And you work with a lot of bands in the area, right? As a producer?
Actually, not too much. The studio side of things isn't my, full-time gig. It's one of them, but it's not my primary source of income. I do record other bands, but the last few years, especially, pandemic stuff, all that's sort of gone on hold. But the last few years prior to that, I was getting a lot more selective with who I was recording. So, yeah, the studio stuff is primarily set up for stuff that I'm involved in. But at the end of the day as well, I'll record other bands. I just mixed recently the new Denouncement Pyre record, which is coming out next year. We just did the mixing here. The previous 2 records that they've done, though, I recorded both of those and did the mixing. But in terms of, a lot of other bands, nah, it's pretty sort of closed circle of bands that I work with. But that's not to say that, it's not an option for anyone that wanted to record here. But, yeah, I live, like I said, I live a couple of hours away from Melbourne, so it's also not the most convenient place for people to record as well, but that's okay. I don't mind things being like that at all.
In terms of the bands that you work with, are you exclusive to the metal scene, or do you work with bands regardless of genre?
Look, I'll work with bands regardless of their genre. I guess my main thing is working with bands that are competent musicians and are well prepared to record. That was actually the reason why I started to get much more selective. I was having bands turn up completely unprepared, not able to play their parts properly, and then hoping that at the end of the process I'd be able to fix all that stuff in the mix, which, it doesn't work that way. And it ends up causing a lot of frustration and wasting a lot of time. So, yeah, I started to get a little bit more selective with who I was going to record and, that kind of thing. So I think that's probably necessary anyway, because, someone comes and records an album or single or whatever in your studio, and their lack of preparation means that their recording really hasn't turned out too good. The first thing anybody's going to do is say, geez, the sound isn't very good. Like, where'd you record this? So it's not necessarily a fault of the engineer. So I distance myself from that kind of thing, not only for my own sanity, but also, to have a level of sort of a standard of, you can get a good sounding record out of that guy if you are prepared, So, yeah, that's the objective there.
In my work life, I do a lot of design and video editing, and oftentimes I'll get, low quality videos or,
right.
low quality photos, and
right. Yeah.
ask, can't you just fix it in Photoshop? And
right.
My response is usually along the lines of, if you want miracles, you need to call Jesus, because I don't do them.
Yeah, man, it's like that's the whole thing. Like early on when I first started recording stuff, like everything's a learning curve, of course. So you find though that like, oh yeah, look, let's just move on. Like we'll come back to that. We'll fix that up later. But in the end, like everything whenever something's out of whack, like whether it's, a drummer turning up with like skins that are fucked and, bad tuning, blah, blah, blah. Like they got 2 days to record, 10 drum tracks and they turn up late, you end up rushing. And, that idea of, we'll fix it later, that became a thing of, you really can't fix it later. You have to get it right at the source, and like you said, like if your source material is shit house, the result isn't going to be anything spectacular. And then you've got people complaining at you for the result, it's like, well, if you give me something better to work with, we wouldn't be in this position. But, oftentimes people aren't ready to accept responsibility for things if they can blame somebody else for their shortcomings,
Let's talk a little bit about Season of Mist and how you
Sure.
guys got involved with them.
Yeah.
This is your second album with Season of Mist, right?
It is, yeah, yeah. Well, Shrapnel, if you don't know, he used to play in Destroyer 666 as well as I did, but that was like 23 years ago, I think now. But anyway, he joined the band in 2012 when he came back he was living in the UK. He moved back to Australia then, and he joined the band because we'd been in Destroyer together back in the 90s. And we'd been in contact and stayed, really good friends whilst he was living in Europe with Destroyer. So when he came back to Australia, I said to him, do you want to join Nocturnal Graves? And he was up for that. He joined the band in 2012. And then in 2016, we went over and played the Maryland Death Fest. And Michael from Season of Mist was there at the festival. So I got to meet him because Shrapnel obviously already knew him. So I got to meet Michael then. And we asked him, we just said, like, would you be interested in working with Nocturnal Graves? And he was like, yeah, look, that could be something that we should talk about. We played the next day, and after the gig, Michael was there and he said, yeah, let's do it, So that's how that happened. We met them at Maryland Death Fest, and at the end of when we got back, they sent through a contract. We started talking a little bit over email, and then they sent through a contract, and all good.
So Nocturnal Graves is soon coming up on their 20th anniversary. Is there anything you guys want to do that you haven't done yet? Well,
I mean, we're actually, because of this pandemic stuff, we're in the middle of writing another album. The songs for An Outlaw Stand, they were ready. They were finished in mid 2020. So, it's been a couple of years almost since we finished the recording. We finished writing that album. So we started writing another one. But with this pandemic stuff and it's pretty volatile out there at the moment, tours getting cancelled, and like even here in Australia, international bands had announced tours and they've been cancelled, and local shows are all being cancelled at the moment because of capacity restrictions. So I think until this sort of stuff clears up and things start happening again on a level of like bands actually being able to fulfill tours and shit like that, I think we'll just keep writing. So we'll probably just have another album out at the same time as this 20th anniversary, I'd imagine. I guess it will be out next year, which will be the 20th anniversary of the band. Yeah. I haven't actually thought of it. Now that you mention it, it's like, yeah, shit, it is 20 years. Yeah. But
and how do you feel about that?
Sorry?
How do you feel about that? 20 years of Nocturnal Graves?
Yeah, I think it's a testament to our character as people. No one in the band has sort of jumped ship and gone, like, taken their life in a different direction. I think everybody's probably more extreme about the whole thing these days, more dedicated to it, more focused on what we're doing as artists and creating music. It's not something that I feel like has weakened over the last couple of decades. I think we've grown more and more passionate about it throughout the years. And yeah, like I said, like I haven't really thought of it that way. I kind of don't think of things in that manner, like, where was I at this time or whatever. I really try to live a lot more in the moment and focus on what's happening now rather than what happened. It's once it's in the past, like, memories are good, and memories are the things that really shape your personality, I guess, and your experience here. But to live in the past, nah. That's not something that I do at all, to be honest. I'm always looking forward. That's why I think when one door closes, I'm already halfway through the next door, and I think that's why we're in, like I said before, we're in the process of writing another album because we haven't been able to do any touring or any shows. Like, the band hasn't even been in a room together the entire band and rehearsed or played together since January 2020 because there's been no gigs or anything. So yeah, we've been focused on that. So I think that will be the 20th anniversary thing, you know, another album, but hopefully touring, you know, hopefully we can get back on some more tours in 2023, you know, like I'd like to get back over to the States. South America actually is somewhere that I've been speaking to people with for a long time about, and we were actually in the process of booking a South American tour we were talking about that in February 2020, and then the pandemic thing hit, and we were still aiming, like we were thinking October 2020 is when we were going to tour South America. But obviously, like sort of mid-year, that all just got cancelled. So since then, we haven't thought about any of that stuff. We're, you know, sitting here watching other bands' tours get cancelled. To us, it's a big thing to try and book an international tour, a band from Australia. So, you know, when there's so much riding on that, and it can be cancelled the night before you leave, you know, we're not in a position to do that. So I think, yeah, the 20th anniversary, we'll probably just see another album released if things stay the way they are, which isn't all bad, you know.
You mentioned discarding some material that would have gone on Outlaw's Stand. Would that material make an appearance on the next album, or are you keeping it aside for something else?
Yeah, I would say no, and the reason being is we wrote material that, you know, was better, was superior to that in our opinion. So yeah, I kind of find that once an album is finished, I kind of detach from that album, you know, in terms of the writing style and stuff that I was going to say, like, often if I listen back to records that I've done in the past, there's tons of times where I hear riffs and ideas and I think I can't recall the mindset that I was in when I wrote that. So yeah, there's often stuff that I hear and think like, yeah, that doesn't sound, I can't remember writing that. So I kind of like the idea of starting fresh. You know, if you're going to do another record, I'm not into the idea of doing the same record twice. You know, I don't like the idea of, you know, finding a formula that works or is safe and just sticking to that. You know, I'd rather try and find new things that we can touch on and go in new directions we can go in while still keeping it sounding like Nocturnal Graves. And, you know, I think if anybody sits and listens to, you know, all 4 records that we've released, they would hear like, yeah, there's a lot of difference in each of the recordings, you know, different style songs and different approaches and stuff like that. So, and I think that will continue on. You know, I think if we get into a point where it's like, yeah, this doesn't feel very creative, but it also sounds too far removed from Nocturnal Graves, then, you know, I don't have a problem with saying that the band has said what it's got to say, and then move on with something else, you know. So it's never we don't do this band as a career, you know. It's an artistic thing, an artistic passion. So if we feel like we're repeating ourselves and it's not very engaging, then yeah, the band would all the time, you know, and not getting stuck in the past.
So On Outlaw's Stand is out now through Season of Mist Records.
Correct.
Jarro?
Yes.
How can people order the album? What's the best way to get it?
Well, people in Europe or the US, they can order directly from Season of Mist. They've got, you know, web shops in both, for both Europe and the US. Australian people, they can order from the LPs from Direct Merch. Australian people would know who they are. Otherwise, you know, like, I'm sure it's pretty widely available in most, you know, distributors, most labels stocking that kind of stuff would have the record. So it'd be pretty easy to pick up a copy. So yeah, I would suggest check out your local and preferred record distributor.
Now, do you want to say anything about the limited edition vinyl that Season of Mist is putting out?
I would like to, but the only thing is I don't know what they are putting out. I saw some pictures, like there was a red vinyl and a marble vinyl or something, which I think looked great, but I've got no idea how many copies they've pressed.
Yeah, I believe in addition to the regular black version, there's as you said, a red version and a clear marbled version. As we're recording this podcast, I believe there's somewhere between 15 and 20 copies left of these special editions. So
okay, well, I mean, I guess in that case, I hope that I will actually have a copy of each of them. But we will see. We'll see when the records arrive. I still haven't seen them yet, but yeah. So hopefully they've thrown some of these different colours in for us, but we will see. Otherwise, I might have to send off an email demanding extra copies. So we'll see. But yeah, I don't know how many of each they've pressed. You know, I one thing that's good with Season and Mist is that they do keep their records in circulation if there is a demand. So, yeah, the limitation thing, I don't know. I see it as a little bit more of, it's a marketing thing, you know. The music's the same, but some people love the limited edition thing. But, you know, Season and Mist will repress it, I'm sure. So then all of a sudden the limitation, I don't know, probably doesn't mean that much to the people that want the limited thing. Yeah, I mean, the limitation thing, for me, it's more about the music, you know. That, I guess that's why I don't pay too much attention to that stuff.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
And if people want to follow Nocturnal Graves online and keep up to date with what you're doing, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, well, we have an Instagram, which is nocturnal_graves_official. That's our Instagram page. And we've got a Facebook page as well, which I think is Nocturnal Graves Official as well, or Official Nocturnal Graves, something like that. Beyond that, yeah, that's the best way to reach us. If someone wants to get in contact at all, they can get to us through those channels.
And if people in your area want to contact you specifically about recording,
yeah,
how can they do that?
They can get to me through the band socials as well, no problem. I'm the one that monitors most of that stuff, so yeah, they can reach me there. Generally, if someone sends a message to any of those socials, I'm the one responding. So yeah, they can reach me through there, no problem.
Excellent.
Awesome.
Is there anything else you want to say?
No, other than, you know, hopefully this pandemic shit fucks off sooner than later and we can organise some shows and we can do another tour. Yeah. So whether we end up being able to play any shows supporting an Outlaw stand or if it ends up being the next album, hopefully, yeah, we can make that happen before the world ends, I guess. So we'll see how it plays out.
Thank you so much, Jarro.
You're more than welcome.
Thank you, Jesus. That was a confirmation.